Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house was supposed to be warm, cozy, a moment to reconnect. I'm Fiona Grant, 28, and I thought I'd finally feel like I belonged. I was wrong. Halfway through the meal, my brother stood his glass raised high, smirk sharp as a blade. "To the most cursed failure in this family," he said, staring me down. The words hit like a punch. My mom laughed loud and careless. My dad joined in, clinking his glass. Only my grandma's eyes met mine, soft with pity, her hand brushing my arm. I forced a smile, my heart pounding, and raised my glass back. "Cheers," I said, voice steady, cold. "You just toasted to everything you're about to lose." His glass slipped shattering on the table. The room went dead silent, forks frozen midair. No one spoke. I felt their stares, but I didn't flinch. Something snapped in me that night. Something bigger than his words. Something that had been building for years. What happened next? Let's just say it wasn't the dinner anyone expected. Stick around to see how it all unraveled. If you're hooked on family drama that hits hard, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. Don't miss how this story explodes. You won't see it coming. I brought my homemade pumpkin pie to my parents' house for Thanksgiving dinner. I'd spent hours perfecting it, hoping it'd spark some warmth in a family that rarely noticed me. Was the one who always showed up, always tried. My job in marketing paid the bills, but it never earned me a seat at the table, not the way my brother did. I walked into their Des Moines home, the smell of turkey and stuffing already thick in the air. My mom was fussing over the table settings, my dad carving the bird like it was his one job of the year. I set the pie down, expecting maybe a nod, a smile. Nothing. Just mom muttering about how the napkins weren't right. My brother swaggered in late, phone in hand, grinning like he owned the place. He was all flash new sneakers, a watch that screamed money he didn't have. "Check out my latest post," he said, shoving his screen toward my cousin. A blurry Instagram shot of him at some rooftop bar captioned, "Living my best life." My cousin raised an eyebrow. "How do you afford that?" he asked, voice sharp. My brother just laughed, brushing it off with a shrug. "I got my ways," he said, scrolling through likes. I caught my grandma's eye across the table. She gave me a small nod, her lips curling slightly at the pie. "Looks delicious," she whispered. I clung to that, but no one else cared. Mom beamed at my brother, piling his plate high with extra stuffing. "You always know how to light up a room," she said, her voice dripping with pride. Dad grunted in agreement, passing him the gravy. I sat there, my fork heavy in my hand, watching them fawn over him. My pie sat untouched, shoved to the side for canned cranberry sauce. I tried to join the conversation, mentioning a big campaign I'd just wrapped at work. "That's nice," Mom said, barely looking up. My brother snorted. "Marketing. Sounds like you're just making ads for toothpaste or something." His smirk cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Mom laughed like it was a great joke. Dad didn't even look up. I pushed my plate forward, forcing a smile. "It's more than toothpaste," I said, keeping my voice even. "I closed a deal that brought in $20,000 for the company." Silence. My cousin glanced at me, impressed, but Mom quickly changed the subject. "Tell us about that bar," she said to my brother. He launched into a story about some influencer party, name-dropping people I'd never heard of. I felt my chest tighten like the air was being sucked out of the room. Grandma reached over, her hand brushing mine. "Your pie's the best thing here," she said softly. I wanted to believe her, but the weight of their dismissal pressed harder. My brother kept going, his voice louder with every word. He bragged about a new jacket, a trip he was planning, all while sipping Dad's expensive wine. My cousin leaned in again. "Seriously, man, where's the money coming from? You got a job we don't know about." My brother's grin faltered just for a second before he waved it off. "Relax, I'm good," he said, scrolling his phone again. Mom shot my cousin a look like he'd crossed a line. Dad just poured more wine. I stared at my plate, the pie's crust crumbling under my fork. I'd spent years propping him up, and they didn't even see it. Grandma's eyes stayed on me, steady and kind. She didn't say more, but her look said enough. She saw me, even if no one else did. I clung to that as my brother's voice filled the room, drowning out everything else. I didn't know then how much worse it would get, how his words would cut deeper before the night was over. But sitting there, watching them hang on his every move, I felt something shift. I wasn't just invisible, I was disposable. And I was done letting it slide. No one in the house knew my brother was only getting by because of me. For years, I'd been the one keeping his life from falling apart, pouring my own money and time into his mess. At 28, I was barely scraping by myself, my marketing job, covering rent and bills with little left over. But my brother, he lived like he had it all. New clothes, fancy dinners, posts on Instagram that screamed success. The truth was uglier. 2 years ago, he called me, voice shaking, begging for help. He'd racked up $10,000 in gambling debts, poker games, sports bets, all spiraling out of control. I wired the money, my savings gutted because I couldn't let him drown. He promised to pay me back. He never did. It didn't stop there. Every month I sent him cash for rent, $500, sometimes more, because he couldn't hold a job. He'd get hired charm, everyone then quit when it got hard. I told myself it was temporary, that he'd figure it out. Instead, he spent the money on bar tabs and new sneakers, posting photos with captions like, "Chasing the dream." I even helped him build that fake image. I connected him with a friend in digital media, got him gigs to pose as an influencer. I edited his posts, suggested hashtags, made him look like someone who mattered. Thousands of followers bought it, but I was the one pulling the strings. He never said thank you. Not once. I'd text him reminders about the money, and he'd reply with emojis or excuses. "I'm good for it." He'd say, then post another photo from some rooftop club. I kept quiet, hoping he'd change, hoping mom and dad would see who he really was. But they didn't. They saw what he wanted them to see. Mom would call, gushing about his latest post. "He's so creative," she'd say, like he was some visionary. "He's just finding his passion." Dad was worse. He'd nod along, acting like my brother's nonsense was a master plan. They never asked how I was doing. Never wondered why I looked so tired. I tried talking to them once a year ago over coffee at their house. I hinted at the money, the debts I'd covered. "He's struggling a bit," I said, choosing my words carefully. Mom cut me off. "He's young," she said, like I was ancient at 28. "He needs time to figure things out. You're stable, you don't need the attention." Dad just sipped his coffee, saying nothing. I left feeling like I'd betrayed him by even bringing it up. They didn't know about the late nights I spent balancing my budget to cover his rent, the weekends I skipped plans to fix his social media posts. They didn't know I was barely holding it together. The worst part, I started believing I had to keep doing it. He was my brother, family, right? If I stopped, what would happen? He'd crash, and somehow it'd be my fault. I'd lie awake calculating how much more I could give before I broke. $10,000 in debts, countless rent payments, hours spent crafting his online persona. It added up. Not just money, but pieces of me, my energy, my patience, my trust. And for what? So he could flash a smile on Instagram and pretend he'd earned it. Mom and Dad's blind spot made it worse. They'd call him charismatic, full of potential. They'd brag about his followers to their friends like it meant something. I wanted to scream the truth, that his life was a lie I'd paid for. But I didn't. I swallowed it. Let it burn inside me. Every time I saw his posts, every time Mom praised him, it felt like a slap. I was invisible. My sacrifices erased. I wasn't just carrying him. I was carrying their delusions too. I kept going because I thought it was what family did. But that night after the dinner, something shifted. I couldn't unsee their faces, Mom's laugh, Dad's nod, my brother's smirk. I'd given everything, and they didn't even notice. I was done being the one who held it all together while he played the star. The dinner was lively until my brother stood to raise his glass. His smile was sharp, eyes locked on me like he'd been waiting for this moment. I braced myself, hoping it was just another of his boasts. Instead, he lifted his whine voice loud enough for the whole table to hear. "To the most cursed failure in this family," he said, staring straight at me. The words hit like a slap, sharp and public. Mom burst out laughing, her head thrown back like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Dad raised his glass, chuckling, joining the toast without hesitation. My cousin froze fork halfway to his mouth, eyes darting between us. I felt the room shrink, every stare pinning me down. But then Grandma's hand found mine under the table, her grip warm, steady. "You're enough," she whispered, so quiet only I could hear. I forced my face to stay calm, but my heart was racing. Years of bailing him out $10,000 for his gambling debts, monthly rent payments, crafting his fake Instagram fame flashed through my mind. And now this. I pushed my chair back, standing to meet his gaze. "I'm done," I said, my voice cutting through the laughter. "No more paying your debts. No more covering your rent. No more building your lies online. You're on your own." The table went silent. Mom's laugh dying in her throat. My brother's smirk vanished, his glass trembling in his hand. I was just joking," he stammered, glancing at Mom for backup. Mom's face twisted, her voice sharp. "You're being too sensitive," she said, leaning forward. "He didn't mean it like that. Don't ruin the night." Dad nodded, his tone firm. "Let's keep the peace, okay? It's Thanksgiving." My cousin shifted uncomfortably, saying nothing. I could feel their judgment, like I was the one breaking the family apart. But Grandma squeezed my hand again, her eyes locked on mine, full of quiet pride. She didn't need to speak. I knew she saw me, really saw me. That gave me the strength to keep going. "No," I said, my voice steadier now. "I'm not the one ruining anything. I've paid for his mistakes for years. I've emptied my savings, worked extra hours, fixed his messes. And you all just clap for him." I turned to my brother, his face pale. "You called me a failure. Look in the mirror. You've got nothing without me." Mom gasped, hand to her chest. "That's enough," she snapped. "He's trying. You don't have to be so cruel." Dad shook his head, muttering about family unity. My cousin looked down, avoiding the fight. But Grandma's grip never wavered, her silence louder than their words. I wanted to scream about every late-night call, every dollar I'd sent, every post I'd written to make him look good. But I didn't. They wouldn't hear it. They never had. Instead, I looked at my brother, his eyes wide, like he finally realized what he'd lost. "Good luck," I said, my voice cold. "You'll need it." I pushed my plate away, the pumpkin pie I'd made still untouched, and walked toward the door. Mom called after me, her voice a mix of anger and panic. "You're leaving over this," Dad added. "Come on, don't make a scene." I didn't turn back. Grandma's eyes followed me, her nod small but certain, like she knew I was doing the right thing. I grabbed my coat, the weight of their words still heavy but no longer crushing. I'd spent years carrying them, his debts, their excuses, their blindness. But that night, I let it go. I stepped out into the cold, leaving the warmth of the house behind. The door closed, and for the first time, I felt free. A week after the dinner, my brother's mocking stare still haunted me. I'd walked out of that house, my heart raw from his words. But something in me wasn't ready to give up on him. Despite everything, his insults, his lies, the way he'd taken me for granted, I wanted to believe he could change. So I did something I hadn't planned. I reached out to a colleague running a startup, a small digital content company looking for fresh faces. They needed someone with energy, someone who could draw a crowd online. My brother, with his polished Instagram persona, was a perfect fit, or so I thought. I pitched him without saying it was me pulling the strings, framing it as a favor to my colleague. They agreed to give him a shot. I texted him the details, keeping it short. "Got you a gig. Content startup. Don't screw it up." He didn't reply for hours, but when he did, it was just a thumbs-up emoji. Typical. I told myself not to expect much, but I couldn't help hoping. Maybe this was the push he needed to stand on his own. The startup put him to work creating short videos, product promos, lifestyle clips, nothing too complex. To my surprise, he showed up. He brought that same charm he used online, and people noticed. His first week, he nailed a promo video that got shared across their socials. The team lead emailed me praising his natural spark. I read it and felt a flicker of pride mixed with disbelief. A few days later, we met at a coffee shop to talk about the project. I watched him walk in all confidence like he'd already made it. He slid into the booth, grinning. "They love me," he said, tossing his phone on the table. "Said I'm a natural." Then, for the first time ever, he pulled out his wallet and paid for his own coffee. I almost dropped my cup. What he said, catching my look: "I can cover a $5 latte." I nodded, keeping my face neutral, but inside I was stunned. Was this real? Was he finally stepping up? That night my grandma called. Her voice was warm, steady like always. "You did a good thing giving him a chance," she said. "Don't let go of that heart of yours." I clutched the phone, her words sinking in. She didn't know the half of it, how much I'd carried for him, how much his betrayal at the dinner had hurt. But she saw something in me I was starting to doubt. Kindness, not weakness. I thanked her, my voice catching. "I just want him to be better," I said. She paused, then added, "He has to want it too." Her words stuck with me, heavy but true. Over the next few weeks, I checked in with the startup team. They kept raving about him, his energy, his ideas, the way he lit up a room. He was posting about the gig now, framing it as his big break. No mention of me. I didn't care. If he kept this up, maybe he'd finally build something real. I let myself hope, picturing him taking responsibility, maybe even thanking me one day. But deep down, a voice nagged at me. I'd seen this before: his bursts of effort, his charm that faded when things got tough. I pushed the doubt aside, telling myself this time was different. He was showing up, delivering, even paying for his own coffee. Small steps, but steps. I started to imagine a future where he didn't need me to bail him out. Maybe he'd get a steady paycheck, move out of that apartment I was still half funding. Maybe he'd stop leaning on mom and dad's praise and actually earn it. I wasn't naive. I knew he could slip back into his old ways. But for the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of something real in him. I wanted to believe it would last. I had to. Everything seemed fine until a rainy Tuesday hit. 2 months after I'd gotten my brother into that startup, I got a call from the team lead. He'd stopped showing up. No warning, no explanation, just gone. I wasn't shocked, but it stung. I'd hoped he'd stick with it, prove me wrong. Instead, he texted me that morning, casual as ever. "Need to talk. Meet me at the diner." I went against my better judgment, expecting another excuse. He was already there, sprawled in a booth, scrolling his phone like nothing had changed. "I quit the gig," he said, not even looking up. "It was holding me back. I need to be free to create." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. He leaned forward, eyes bright with some new scheme. "I've got this idea, big one. Content platform, my own brand. I just need some startup cash. $2,000 a month, that's all." "You in?" My stomach twisted. $2,000. Every month. For a vague brand he couldn't even explain. I'd heard this before: his gambling debts, his rent, his endless promises. I shook my head. "No," I said, my voice flat. "I'm done funding your dreams." His face hardened, the charm gone. "You're so selfish," he spat. "Jealous of me, aren't you? Can't stand that I'm going big." I almost laughed. Big. He'd just thrown away the one real chance I'd given him. I stood to leave, but he kept going. "You're just like everyone else, doubting me. I thought you were family." His words cut, but not like they used to. I'd heard them too many times. "Family," I said, turning back. "I gave you everything: money, time, a shot at something real. You quit. That's on you." He rolled his eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. I walked out, his voice fading behind me. I didn't look back. That evening, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I knew what was coming. He called me upset. She said, her tone sharp. Why won't you help him? He's sensitive, you know that. This idea of his could be huge. I gripped the phone, my patience fraying. He quit the startup I got him into. I said, he's asking for $2,000 a month for nothing. I'm not doing it. Mom sighed like I was the problem. You've always been so hard on him, she said. He needs support, not judgment. I bit my tongue, wanting to scream about the years I'd supported him, the $10,000 I'd paid, the rent checks, the Instagram posts I'd crafted. But she wouldn't hear it. Dad called next, his voice gruff. Your mom's worried, he said. You're stressing her out. Just give him a chance. He's got potential. Potential. That word again. I'd heard it my whole life, always about him, never me. Potential doesn't pay bills, I said. I've given him enough chances. I'm done. He paused, then tried again. He's your brother. You don't turn your back on family. I felt my chest tighten, their words piling on like they always did. But this time, I wasn't bending. I called them back the next day, both on speaker. I need to say something, I started, my voice steady. For years I've carried him. I paid his debts, his rent, built his whole image. You never saw it. You praised him, ignored me, and now you're defending him again. I'm not his bank anymore. I'm not his fixer. I'm done. Mom gasped like I'd betrayed them. You're being unfair, she said. He's trying. Dad chimed in. You're tearing this family apart. I shook my head, though they couldn't see it. No, I said. I'm just done holding it together for someone who doesn't care. I hung up my hands, shaking, but my mind clear. Their voices, his accusations, their excuses used to make me doubt myself. Not anymore. I'd given him a chance to change, and he'd thrown it away. I wasn't responsible for his failures, and I was done letting them think I was. After that argument, I knew I had to stop for good. 6 months had passed since I'd walked away from my brother's demands, and I was done carrying his weight. I blocked his number first. No more late-night texts begging for cash or excuses for his latest failure. Then I stopped going to family gatherings. No more awkward dinners. No more pretending everything was fine. Mom called, leaving voicemails about Christmas plans, Easter brunches, but I didn't reply. I couldn't sit at another table where they'd praise him and ignore me. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. For the first time, I was choosing myself. A letter arrived one afternoon, handwritten from Grandma. Her words were careful, deliberate, like she'd thought them through for weeks. You've given so much, she wrote. Now live for you. You're enough. I held the paper, tracing her shaky handwriting, and felt a warmth I hadn't known I needed. She didn't mention my brother, didn't guilt me into coming back. She just saw me, really saw me. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer, reading it again, when doubt crept in. It reminded me why I was doing this, why I had to keep going. My brother's world started crumbling just as I'd known it would. Without my money, his so-called brand fell apart. His Instagram posts, once polished and frequent, slowed to a trickle. The followers he'd bragged about stopped engaging, no more likes, no more comments. I heard from a mutual friend that his latest venture, some half-baked app idea, had tanked before it even launched. He'd pitched it to a few local investors, but they saw through his charm. No one was funding his lifestyle anymore. No new sneakers, no rooftop bars. He was running out of options, and I wasn't there to bail him out. Mom called again, her voice tight with worry. He's struggling, she said, like I hadn't warned her. You need to come talk to him. Help him out. I took a deep breath, keeping my tone calm. I've helped enough, I said. He's 24. He needs to figure it out. She didn't like that. You're abandoning him, she said, her words sharp. Family doesn't do that. I wanted to laugh, but it hurt too much. Family. Where were they when I was draining my savings for him? Dad got on the phone next. His voice heavier. "We're worried about you too," he said, but it felt hollow. "Come to dinner. We'll sort this out." I shook my head, though they couldn't see. "No," I said. "I'm not coming back to fix his messes." They didn't stop. Mom sent texts, long paragraphs about how I was breaking her heart, how my brother just needed one more chance. Dad left a voicemail saying I was being stubborn, that family meant sacrifice. I didn't respond. I'd sacrificed enough years of my life, thousands of dollars, my own peace. They couldn't see it, or wouldn't. I heard through my cousin that my brother had moved back into Mom and Dad's house. He was sleeping in his old room, no job, no plans, just leaning on them like he'd leaned on me. They let him, of course. They always would. I thought about Grandma's letter, her words steadying me. I wasn't cutting them off to be cruel. I was doing it to survive. Every time I felt guilty, I remembered their faces at that dinner, their laughter at his insults, their endless excuses for him. I'd spent so long trying to prove I was enough, but I didn't need to anymore. I was done begging for their approval, done cleaning up after someone who'd never change. I kept moving forward, focusing on my own life, my job, my friends, my own small victories. I wasn't perfect, but I was free. My brother's choices were his now, and so were the consequences. 6 months later, Piper sent me one of my brother's posts. It wasn't the usual flashy photo, no rooftop bars, no designer clothes, just a plain selfie, him sitting in Mom and Dad's living room, captioned short and vague, "Starting over." Piper texted, "He's not the same anymore." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of relief and distance. My life had changed too, and I wasn't the person who'd once carried his weight. I'd landed a better job in marketing, leading campaigns that actually excited me. I was setting boundaries, saying no without guilt, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Piper filled me in over coffee one weekend. She'd heard from mutual friends that my brother had gone quiet. No more boasting about big plans or chasing followers. His online presence, once his pride, had faded to almost nothing. Companies he'd pitched to for gigs turned him away. His reputation for flaking had spread. "He's not even trying to fake it anymore," Piper said, stirring her latte. "Lives at home, barely leaves." I nodded, unsurprised. Without my money, without anyone propping him up, he'd crashed. Part of me felt sorry for him, but not enough to step back in. Mom and Dad were struggling too, Piper told me. They'd been dipping into their savings to cover his bills, groceries, phone, even his car insurance. They'd always enabled him, but now it was dragging them down. I remembered Mom's voicemails, her pleas for me to come back to fix things. I hadn't answered. Dad had sent one last text a month ago. "We miss you." I wanted to believe it, but I knew they missed the version of me who'd cleaned up their son's messes. I didn't respond. I'd spent too long trying to make them see me, and I was done chasing their approval. Grandma called one evening, her voice bright despite her age. "I'm proud of you," she said, no preamble. "You chose yourself, and that's not easy." I smiled, clutching the phone. She didn't mention my brother or my parents, just talked about her garden, her new recipe for apple pie. But her words hit deep. She'd always seen me, even when I felt invisible. "You keep going," she said, before hanging up. "You're stronger than you know." I sat there, letting her words settle, feeling lighter than I had in years. Looking back, I saw the lesson in all of it. Setting boundaries wasn't just about saying no, it was about protecting my own heart. I'd spent years pouring myself into someone who wouldn't change, hoping my family would notice my sacrifices. They didn't, and that hurt, but it taught me something. I couldn't control their choices, only mine. Letting go of my brother, stepping away from their expectations, gave me room to breathe, to build a life that was mine. It wasn't selfish, it was survival. My brother's fall wasn't my fault, but it showed what happens when you lean on others instead of standing up. He'd had chances, my money, my connections, my time, but he'd thrown them away. His life, now quiet and small, was the result of his own steps, or lack of them. Mom and Dad's struggles were theirs too. They'd chosen to carry him just as I'd once done. I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. Responsibility isn't just a word. It's a choice, one I'd made for myself, and one he'd avoided. I kept moving forward, focusing on my work. My friends, the small joys I'd overlooked for so long. I wasn't perfect, but I was learning to live for me. Grandma's call, Piper's updates, they reminded me I wasn't alone. I'd found my own strength, and that was enough.